Many believe that the COVID-19 pandemic is the greatest global crisis of this century. They say its depth and scale are enormous and not restricted to one area. At the moment, the main concern of the world is that the pandemic is threatening the public health. But then there's the social and economic crisis to come. And let's not forget about its political effects. Each crisis alone could provide a seismic shock that permanently changes the international system and balance of power as we know it. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Leila Faromarzi, and in this episode of The Outbreak, we're going to talk about the world after the coronavirus pandemic.
The COVID-19 pandemic is not just creating a health crisis, it affects every aspect of human lives. Now everyone talks about a looming economic recession, but the crisis is about to change the political powers as well. The combination of a deadly virus, inadequate planning and incompetent leadership has placed humanity on a new and worrisome path. So, the way every government responds to the pandemic can determine its future. Those who can control it and save more lives will be praised, and those who are not so successful in managing the crisis will be condemned. Even now, politicians are accusing one another of mismanagement.
Later today, you'll hear from the President in his daily briefing. These briefings are an important opportunity to inform and reassure the American public. They're not a place for political attacks or to lash out at the press. They're about the American people.
There's also a possibility that the coronavirus pandemic accelerates the shift in power and influence from West to East. So far, the Asian nations such as South Korea and China had a better response to the pandemic comparing to Europe and the United States. As a result, those who can recover faster from the catastrophe will play bigger roles in the future.
Solving this problem requires political commitment and political coordination.
The pandemic will strengthen the state and reinforce nationalism. Since borders are closed and nations are isolated, internationalism seems irrelevant. But no one can deny that although isolation is the best strategy for now, the power of teamwork shouldn't be underestimated. India took the initiative to convene a video conference of all South Asian leaders to craft a common regional response to the threat. So the pandemic can also push the global leaders into recognizing the value of cooperating to tackle the big global issues.
Although we said that the coronavirus pandemic will change the face of politics, what won't change is the fundamentally conflictive nature of world politics. Previous worldwide pandemics did not end great power rivalry, nor did they usher in a new era of global cooperation. Let's see what our guest says about this. Joining us now is Hossein Askari, the Southwest Asia Coordinator for the International Schiller Institute from Stockholm. Hello and welcome to the program, Mr. Askari. Would you say that the coronavirus crisis will affect politics worldwide?
Well, definitely it will have an enormous effect. But first of all, let me say one thing is that you remember that before the outbreak of the coronavirus, we had two different world orders moving in different or opposite directions. We had what we call the new paradigm in the world, led by China, Russia, and their partners in the BRICS countries, in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and so on, creating a new world order.
Would you say that the coronavirus crisis can bring an end to capitalism?
And the issue is, what do our societies need? What kind of system we need? The system of globalization, as we have known it in the past 40 years, has collapsed because it's immoral and it's based on profit making rather than improving the living conditions of peoples all over the world. We have had a geopolitical system at the same time where the powerful make the rules and want to decide even what kind of government other people should have. So it's a system which imposes, as we know, economic sanctions that kills people en masse, as we saw in Iraq earlier, and as we see now in the US sanctions against Iran and Venezuela. This system was not a system that followed natural law, and that's why it has collapsed.
Thanks for that, Hossein. Talk to you again later. There's a growing fear that the COVID-19 pandemic could be the straw that breaks the camel's back of economic globalization. While a lot of experts believe that a devastating global recession is coming, there are others who say that the pandemic can have positive effects as well.
Economic collapse is the most talked about topic regarding the pandemic's effect.
First, the outlook for global growth. For 2020, it is negative, a recession at least as bad as during the global financial crisis or worse.
The fundamental shock to the world's financial and economic system is the recognition that global supply chains and distribution networks are deeply vulnerable to disruption. The coronavirus pandemic will therefore not only have long-lasting economic effects, but lead to a more fundamental change. Globalization allowed companies to farm out manufacturing all over the world and deliver their products to markets on a just-in-time basis, bypassing the costs of warehousing. Inventories that sat on shelves for more than a few days were considered market failures. Supply had to be sourced and shipped on a carefully orchestrated global level. COVID-19 has proven that pathogens can not only infect people, but poison the entire just-in-time system.
The economic impact is and will be severe, but the faster the virus stops, the quicker and stronger the recovery will be.
Given the scale of financial market losses the world has experienced since February, companies are likely to come out of this pandemic decidedly gun-shy about the just-in-time model and about globally dispersed production.
We will massively step up emergency finance. Nearly 80 countries are requesting our help, and we are working closely with the other international financial institutions to provide a strong, coordinated response for largest possible impact.
What's happening to the world can also affect global capitalism. After the pandemic, supply chains will be likely closer to home and filled with redundancies to protect against future disruption. That may cut into companies' near-term profits, but render the entire system more resilient.
One thing is for sure, the coronavirus pandemic will not only have long-lasting economic effects, but will lead to a more fundamental change. And change doesn't necessarily mean a negative one, it can be positive as well. Now let's take a look at what people have posted on social media about this issue. Beginning with Victor. A lot of people, he says, are warning against the looming recession caused by the pandemic, including former politicians and lecturers. Next is by Anand, who says people were also saying that small businesses and self-employed business people will suffer the most. And third and last is by Cullen. There were also people who believed people should panic over money, and for the time being it's better to concentrate on the health crisis that engulfs the world. People are certainly worried. Let's ask our guest about this. Hello again, Hossein. Everyone's warning against the global recession to follow the coronavirus pandemic. How can we tackle this incident?
Yes, there is a solution. I would like to bring people's attention to an emergency call issued by the chairwoman of our Schiller Institute, an international call, Mrs. Helga Tsepp-LaRouche. She called for an emergency summit among the leaders of the four major powers of the world. That's China, it's Russia, India, and the United States. The leaders of these nations must decide to act jointly against the crisis. But also to build a new Bretton Woods system, a new international financial and economic system to save the world economy after the coronavirus.
Thanks again, Mr. Askeri. Moving on. Now, when people talk about the coronavirus, they keep warning about political and economic effects it will have across the globe. But have you thought about what it can do to people's way of life? Will society stay the same after the pandemic?
The coronavirus pandemic has contained people in their homes. Who knows how long it will take until one can, once again, gain their freedom of movement. The outside world now seems like a dangerous territory, and socializing feels like a very risky business. So if we continue to stay isolated, what can we expect? Will nations stay closed? Will touching become a taboo? What will eating in restaurants mean? What will happen to social events?
And we can't control how virulent the virus is. We can control the rate in the population, and that's what we should be doing, whether that's by legislation or enforcement or otherwise.
While we cannot predict the future accurately, for the time being, the comfort of being in the presence of others is slowly being replaced by a greater comfort of absence, especially with those we don't know intimately. Many people and businesses are realizing that there's no need to be outside to get their works done. Companies will see that many projects can be followed online and meetings can be carried out with laptops. In short, after COVID-19, we can expect a world that is less open, less prosperous, and less free. But in a crisis, moments also present opportunity, more sophisticated and flexible use of technology, less polarization, a revived appreciation for being outdoors and life's other simple pleasures. Even tours and sightseeing can be done online without the need to dress up and travel. The paradox of online communication will ratchet up. It creates more distance, but also more connection as we communicate more often with people who are physically farther and farther away and who feel safer to us because of that distance.
Sounds hard to believe for now. Let's talk about it with our guest. Do you think that massive lockdowns and isolations will lead to more isolated societies, and will globalization reach its end with the coronavirus?
Well, we have to differentiate between two effects of the coronavirus. We have the short-term and long-term problems. Yes, on the short term, the societies will be more isolated, and even after that, people will be more cautious. On the long term, however, we need to find a solution for the causes why these problems happen. Look at the last 40 years of the so-called globalization. In the transatlantic world, we moved away from a society based on industrialization, based on production, based on investment in healthcare, infrastructure, education. We moved into a consumer society on the one hand, and we turned our financial and banking system into a major casino economy.
Thank you. That was Hossein Askari from Stockholm. That's it for today. Join us again on the next episode of The Outbreak. From me, Leila Faramarzi, and the whole team here, thanks for watching, and look after yourselves and each other.